Cool. I'm really impressed. You guys could actually do your talk without any slides. All right. Good evening, everyone. My name's Simon McCarthy. I'm a structural engineer at heart. I've been living in Mackay since Easter. So I'm enjoying the 3 seasons that you have every year. It's last summer, this summer, and next summer. So I've been an engineer for about 25 years. Chartered engineer, registered in Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, Tasmania. I've been doing off-site construction or modular construction for just over 10 years. That image you can see here in the middle, that was my first project. The intention for that was a 4-storey apartment building in one of the inner city suburbs of Melbourne. And the intent was that as the basement car park was being excavated, these modules, these apartments, were being built off-site. So we're doing 2 things at once. And as a trial assembly, we did this trial assembly, the building surveyor asked for that to happen. And we stacked these 4 stories together, completed the building in a day and a half in the car park at the factory. And that's when I got hooked. And I thought, this makes a lot of sense. A lot has changed in the last 10 years. We're sharing a lot more knowledge around the world. So, I do a lot of talking with the guys in the UK and the US and Europe, particularly in Europe, where you've got similar issues with seasons, sort of forcing a lot of work needing to be done indoors. So particularly in the Scandinavian countries, they have the big winter issues. So, lots to learn from those guys. I actually specialise in mid to high rise, or particularly mid-rise construction, and the reasons are, they'll become obvious down the track. So I'll start off with a couple of definitions, which you'll hear me use these terms interchangeably tonight. By the way, if anyone wants to ask any questions, please interrupt me. Just raise your hand. Happy to keep it very low key. MMC is modern methods of construction, okay, and encompasses a whole lot of different types of prefabrication that are being done in the factory. So that includes modular construction, panelised construction, and most recently 3D printing. And even robot bricklaying as well, which you're seeing in New South Wales and WA. They're all modern methods of construction, basically anything that's not traditional construction. Modular is standardised. So if you think about Lego blocks, if I go that basic, Lego blocks essentially in the old rectangular shape can go in 2 different directions. You can stack them however high, they always align. That's my definition of modular, right? Into nice regular patterns. Volumetric modular, so the big volumes, cubic metres, are what you see up there in the top right-hand corner. That was a project that was done, 6-storey building in Melbourne, roughly about 12 years ago, I think. So basically what happens with those is you complete at least 80%, sometimes 90% of those modules, those rooms, those buildings in the factory. So when you have a look at someone like Marriott or even Hilton Hotel, they'll even put the furniture inside those rooms before it even shipped to site, okay? Flat pack, 2D prefabricated panels. So these panels here are all done in the factory. The facades on the outside, the windows are fitted, the seals are included in that. They line up perfectly on site. Behind this wall here, the walls already have the conduits in it, the plumbing, the electrical, the power points. They're even painted on the inside. The switches are on the inside. And they've just got a gap that you can't see there at the bottom and the top, so that they're propped on site, bolted into place, and everything goes together quite well. Another term, kit of parts. So talking about Scandinavians, I'm sure you've all seen the IKEA approach to putting together your furniture. That's essentially what kit of parts are. So the standard details on putting these panels together, there's probably 2 or 3 different types. And we're getting to the point where they're proprietary. There are companies that will sell those connection details. And with modular, we're still trying to refine that. I've actually developed a system that'll go to about 10 to 12 levels, and I give that out as open source. just to get rid of that complexity of let's use someone else's system. And the last bit of definition, DFMA. So what DFMA is when you design a traditional building, what normally happens is you see the plans for that building and how it's going to be used in the final occupancy type. So if it's a house, you see how the house is going to be laid out. If it's for a hotel, this is what the hotel rooms actually look like. Not too much consideration on how it's going to be put together. There is a little bit. But when you do off-site construction or prefabrication or modern methods of construction, you need to design and document the building in the way that it's going to be manufactured in the factory and assembled on site. There's a lot more involved in it, okay? So that's what design for manufacture and assembly is about. You document the building for the way that the building is going to be built using the system or the framing system, whether it's steel, timber, etc. So let's get rid of a couple of perceptions about modular. I'm sure a lot of people hear modular and they think the old donga, right? No, I'm not talking about shipping containers. I'm not talking about portable, temporary at all. They're non-compliant, okay? I've never designed a building that's non-compliant, okay? I can't to have my buildings registered and insured. These are cheap, they're low in quality, they're noisy, they're cold in winter, they're hot in summer, and they're uncomfortable. So permanent modular construction, lovely if it looks like that. That's when you need a good architect. These are compliant. So right from the very start, we bring the collaborative team in, the architects, the engineers, your building surveyors, your building certifiers are across this the entire time, and they tell us whether something's compliant or not. They're much higher in quality than even traditional construction because they're built in a controlled factory environment. And when you do modular and it's standardisation and it's repeated, that level of quality just keeps getting better and better. They're planned and the designs are refined until you keep getting it right. When you get to the luxury of actually repeating designs across various sites, then those designs have this continual improvement process where you've got an existing design that you know that works. There are a couple of things there that didn't work as well as you wanted it to. Let's make it even better again. And of course, they're much more energy efficient. So this is an example of, I think it was just a conventional house, and what we exploded it, right, on the model. And it breaks it up into all these different parts using different manufacturers, and we design it so that these all go together. That's that manufacture and assembly process, right? So when we're talking about sensitivity to native land, for example, we like to use screw piles, right, or helical piles through here. Right, so they're piles that go into the ground like a massive big screw, and you don't remove any of the soil whatsoever. 50 years down the track, when we don't need that building anymore, we can unscrew these, take it away, and you're really only taking dust, right? Very little disturbance to the ground. But when you've got piles that are installed with, very, very good accuracy, it means that our connections to our floor system go together much easier, our walls go together much easier, our ceilings go together much easier. And this refinement is just makes it so much easier to get to site and reduce the construction cost and program. It also means you get a lot less trades attending site as well. So when you've got modular trades, it means that most of those tradies use the car park at the factory, and it means you've got a lot less vehicles on site. It means that you've got less coordination to do on site. So as you saw in my first project there, we did a lot of that coordination and stacking in the car park at the factory to make sure everything works before we get it to site. When we stage the assembly, it means, and we look at the sequence of it, and I'll show you some animation later on, it means that we don't have the cranes on site as well, as often, right? We only need them there when they have to be there. They're not there on standby. And of course, it also means that the staging of earthworks is concurrent with the modules in the factory. So some trades don't even need to attend site at all because they're only ever needed in the factory. A great example for coordination and collaboration is having a look at what we call bathroom pods. These are completed bathrooms that are done in the factory. And they kind of look like this from the outside, right? So this is the back of the toilet. You can see there's a bit of pipe work in the background there. Insulation hasn't been applied yet, but inside it looks like this. The tiles are in, the painting's done, all the fitments are in, ready to go. Again, Hilton, Marriott, a lot of the hotel chains use these quite a lot. This is a factory in Central Coast of New South Wales. They're all light gauge steel or cold form steel. There's another one in Melbourne called Sync, which are concrete based. They're so successful, run by Hickory, that all their competitors buy their bathroom pods made from them. Right? So as soon as they hit go on the button, all of a sudden their electric drawings go out with the bill of quantities. The electrician knows what's going to come, the tiler knows what's going to come, and everything works together within 3 days. Right? So what's the benefit of this? In a typical bathroom, 2,500 tiles, 100 metres of pile and cables, 15 PC items, like proprietary items like your sink, your toilets, your mirrors, all that sort of stuff. 8 tradesmen, normally takes about 3 weeks to put a bathroom together from go to woe with a waterproofer. When it's done in the factory like this, in a sequential system, they can be put together in 2 hours. Done. Right? And the big hotel chains are so happy with this system, right? They use it all the time. Marriott, for instance, are so big with their different chains that they open up a new hotel somewhere in the world every 13 hours, right? 30% of their hotels use this system because it's so efficient. And it also means that that comes with a warranty certificate, proprietary, right? Waterproofing, done by the same waterproofer every time. Same with your electrical, same with your plumbing. Makes a lot of sense. Mirvac actually showed a presentation a couple of years at Prefab Oz conference where they put a camera out the front of one bathroom that was being done on site, and then they put another camera out the front of a bathroom that was being done in the factory. The one on site had around about, 1,250 movements in and out of that door. Plumbers, electricians, wirers, you name it. And then by going the proper sequence, and these guys knowing what they have to do every day in the factory, they reduce that down to 250 movements for exactly the same bathroom, just to show you what happens when you get into that production line process. So they managed to reduce the construction traffic by 80%, okay, and then reducing the construction time by 30%, because waterproofing and plumbing still takes time to do, but they also reduced the waste by 50%. That's a massive figure. Modern methods of construction isn't just about the physical quality as well, it's the digital one. We actually do the building twice. We develop the building once digitally as a model, and then we repeat that process by doing it physically during construction and assembly, right? So that's what BIM actually stands for, Building Information Modelling. Not just a pretty 3D drawing, it's got a lot of data that's added to it, right? So the 3D one can add your automatic bill of quantities. So as a structural engineer, I've already dedicated what size steel members these are, what grade of steel, how much there is, and when it's all being coordinated together, that helps the builder figure out exactly how much it's going to cost and how long it's going to take to put together. That's 3D. 4D is when we pull that apart and we start putting it together bit by bit. This is the actual construction sequence. But one of the main benefits of doing 4D is that as your traditional program or your Gantt chart moves from left to right, so you've got your footings and then you've got your floors, then you've got your columns, etc. As that moves from left to right, you see the building going together. And what we're finding with tenders is that it's a massive advantage, and the difference in tender prices is significantly reduced. And the reason is that when you've got your traditional drawings in front of you, people are reading a 2D drawing and interpreting it differently. So if you've got 4 different tenders, you've got 4 different ways of putting that building together. But when we go to 4D in the animation, you're showing them how it's going to go together. And a lot of that ambiguity is taken out the window. 5D is when you start adding in the cost. So when you know how much each of these members is going to cost to buy, to weld, to cut, to bolt, you start adding in electrical, plumbing, etc. That the 5D works with the 4D. So as your building is going together in an animation, your Gantt chart is going from left to right. You can actually see your construction budget and how much you're spending on the project as the assembly process is progressing. You take that to the bank before you've even lifted a spanner, and you've shown your due diligence on how effective and how much work you've put into the building before you start needing the money to go and start making the building itself. Again, being structural, I love using different materials. That's a typical steel volumetric frame. Okay, concrete. So concrete, you can make modules. They're quite heavy. We only really use them for prisons, but we use a lot of the concrete beams, concrete floor planks, concrete columns, all prefabricated off-site that come together because we've designed for manufacture and assembly. In other words, we designed the building knowing that we're going to have the prefab columns coming from Brisbane, knowing that we're going to have the prefab floor planks coming from Brisbane, and we've dictated that assembly sequence. Great for a car park. Timber, mass engineered timber. This is a big CLT project. Again, this is another modern method of construction. As long as we've designed, knowing that we're going to be using CLT, which is cross-laminated timber, or massive glulam beams, glulam columns, etc. And then the building has been done in the model itself, and when we get to site, everything goes together exactly how we wanted it to be. You see a lot of timber in the media for several different reasons, but one of them is that industry has been very clever in designing their connection systems, so they're very consistent. They go together without virtually any training, right? You need a good builder to make sure that they can see everything going together on site, but the connections are proprietary. They don't need to be redesigned or anything from scratch. Different building types. So residential, this is single level. I think about 80 to 90% of modular in the country at the moment is still single level. We're trying to get that to multi-level. So yeah, single level houses, granny flats, teenager retreats, worker accommodation. I'm sure you've seen a lot of that. This is a CQU's building in, is it Early? I can't remember how to pronounce that term.
Early.
Thank you. That's one of Dennis's buildings. He went out there today. This building's 10 years old. Okay, held up quite well, very well. So we also do multi-level modular buildings for apartments, multifamily, hotels, resorts. I don't think Tahi's here. There's at least one resort at Hook Island, just north of here on the Whitsundays. That's all going to be manufactured off-site. Okay, again, 90% done in the factory. So as the piles are being put into the ground up in the islands there, those modules are being ready, put on a ship, ready to bring up there. And again, for workers' accommodation. Education, so this is a school building, 3-storey school building in Victoria. Modular is very heavily used for school classrooms, university classrooms, etc. I'm working with one particular school here in McCarthy at the moment, very early days with that, and they're looking at a lot of growth. So one thing that we're looking at, the benefits of using modular for that, is that at the moment they want a 2-storey building. They suspect in 5 years, maybe even less, they'll need 3 stories, and then maybe in 10 years, 4 stories. So what we're doing is we're designing the footings for the 4 stories now. They'll put in the first two stories, okay? And these can be done within 6 months, right? In half a year, you can start getting another building full of fees coming in the door as a private school. And then over the summer holidays, we can add a floor, right, while the kids are on holidays. You can add the lift. So in Australia, we've got 3 manufacturers that provide ready-made prefabricated lifts. And they're installed vertically, top down, bolted on site in the 1 day, up and ready within a week. Normally there's a 6-month lead time to get them from Europe. Again, multi-level car parks. So again, this is all prefabricated planks, precast concrete planks, precast concrete columns. The cranes there on site. There's a lot of consistency in the way this building goes together. Okay, it was designed for manufacturing with precast concrete, and that's the assembly sequence on site. Very, very similar system for storage facilities. It means concurrent construction. Again, while the footings were being done on site, these were all being manufactured and cured in the factory. and it's quite easy to do a 6-storey building in less than 6 months, up and operational. Vertical extensions, so you just heard me talk about that with the schools. This was an office building, 6-storey office building or 8-storey office building in South Bank in Melbourne. It was designed around about 2002 to have an additional 3 floors when they needed it. So around about 2015, the client said, we want to add those additional 3 floors. Luckily, the structural engineers said, let's use timber, right? So yeah, it's a lot of timber. It's really thick timber, but it's still half the weight of concrete. So from an owner's point of view, he got 6 additional floors using mass engineered timber rather than 3 floors with concrete. It enabled this building to continually be occupied and leased out while the additional floors were being put up on top. Okay, really cool, really quick. Dennis, again with Bassis, has done hospital healthcare facilities. I know Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria are using modular for mental health facilities. There's a lot of standardisation in healthcare facilities, particularly hospital wards. And with the mental health retreats, the high-end proprietary ligatures that need to be carefully installed as well. So productivity in Australia, you can see here, this is construction, right? Over the last 30 years, we've actually reduced productivity by 0.2%, okay? Compared to other industries that have increased by 33%. In manufacturing, transport's gone a little bit backwards. I don't understand why. But essentially, we're still building the same way as what we did 30 years ago, something 100 years ago, right? I remember doing a presentation online during COVID where I was delivering a lecture online on modern methods of construction. Directly across the road, Metricon were putting together one of their mansions, and this truck pulled up the whole heap plank of timber, right? They put those walls together stick by stick. And I couldn't help myself. I'd go over and talk to the site manager, and he said, Simon, there was some guy in admin that decided it was going to be $1.50 per square metre cheaper to actually get someone to come in here with a hammer and put it together than to actually get them made in the factory. When the frame was up, it sat there in the rain for 2 weeks. Right? We're still doing stuff the same way as what we did back in the 80s. This was in the paper today. No, it wasn't. 16th of, yes it is, yesterday. So yeah, regional Queensland, they're looking at using a lot of off-site to help build downsizing. So, housing shortage in Mackay. Yes, the local economy is booming. I've only been here 6 months, but I can see it. Love the place. There's a lot of investment, a lot of new jobs coming in from infrastructure, mining, resources, very strong agriculture, of course the sugar canes, etc. And of course, lifestyle and appeal, right? Fantastic. But the rental vacancy is down below 1%. And I heard from someone here tonight, it's around about 0.4%. Which is less than what a balanced market rate of 2 to 3% should be. So the status quo approach to construction isn't keeping up. The way that we're building here just isn't keeping up. And we don't have the resources. We don't have the number of builders. We don't have the modular factories. So from the council economic profile last year, from 2013 to 2023, there was an additional 8,000 new residents. There's just under 4,000 new housing projects. So that's about 2 residents per housing project. And last year, there were 306 new housing projects alone. Looking forward for the next 20 years, there's 25% projected growth, which means that we'll need approximately 16,000 new housing projects over the next 20 years, which equates to around about 800 houses per year from now on, as opposed to the 306 that we did last year. So the status quo approach to construction currently is not going to keep up.
I think the other thing, Simon, even outside of population, I was reading some stuff the other day, it was not necessarily from Mackay, but Queensland-wide.
Yeah.
It was estimating that there was 70,000 additional homes that were required just because more people wanted to own their own home, basically. So So going from 3 or 4 people in a home to
Yep.
2 people in a home, and the drive of that, or 1 person in a home,
Yep.
was effectively an additional 70,000 homes in Queensland, and with no fundamental population.
That's absolutely correct. The last census showed that around about 30% of homes in Australia are single occupancy only. It's a tough one to deal with. So this is the locality cost index, and this is from GRC quantity surveyors. So what this basically says is that Brisbane delivers a locality index of around about 100, all right? Mackay is at 116, which means that it generally costs 16% more to construct buildings in Mackay than what it would do in Brisbane. If we utilise resources, modular factories around Brisbane, it's going to be cheaper than if we had the factories here, right? It's a little bit of a cost saving. To give you an idea, and you're right about regional Queensland, Rocky is about the same with Townsville, right?
It's called the mining tax in those 3 towns.
Right, yeah. Cairns is around about 9 to 10% more expensive than Brisbane, right? But this sort of shows you another reason why it's difficult to build here and to get affordable housing in these areas. Apparently this is adjusted for costs with transportation to get here, the cost of labour that's already here, the materials to get here, and the allowances that come with that. So by observation, it looks like we're falling behind in construction. We're not building enough every year. We've got a high construction cost compared to the larger areas of Queensland. We've got limited building trades and building techniques. It's not that they're doing anything wrong, but we could improve on that with modern methods of construction where we can get it. We've got a limited supply chain that's here, and I know that the mines absorb a lot of that as well. We need extra accommodation, construction worker accommodation on the larger projects, like hospital expansion, etc. And of course, there's that seasonal interference as well. So around the summer months, we've got the rain, potential cyclones, dare I say it, that could also hold up building works happening as well, which you can do in the factory.
Can I just ask a question?
Yes.
So you were saying on the previous slide the cost of construction for the Mackay area, and then the cost of construction out of Brisbane, and then you add the transport cost to get them to Mackay.
Correct.
That is still cheaper than building something in Mackay.
Yes. Yep. It doesn't add 16% additional cost. I think it's around about 5 to 8%.
Okay.
Yep, from my knowledge. I'll caveat that. So modular construction, depending on how big the project is, can be more expensive. So if you've got an individual house and you compare that to an identical house done using traditional construction, modular will be more expensive.
Okay.
And the reason is that you've got to build it, let's say you build it the same way, once in the factory, once on site. If it's in the factory, you've got to lift it, move it back of a truck, you've got craneage, you've got additional workers to do that sort of thing. If you have a project where you've got repetition across 3 levels, 6 levels, etc., that efficiency in the factory starts meaning to savings coming in. And that's where modular really starts kicking in as being cheaper in construction, and then reduced construction time has other ongoing effects I'll talk about in a sec.
So have you modelled figures around the build? If we were to build a factory here, would we be able to get some of those costs down if that was the case, if we had a factory on the ground?
Yep, and there are people here who are talking about factories already. I found that out the first week, so it was fascinating. I don't know if I actually announced it on LinkedIn or something like that, but the first week I was here, I think you contacted me the second week, people saying, can you please bring modular here for those exact reasons. QBuild actually have a factory in Brisbane, and they also have, where's the other one? Cairns, is it? Yep, okay. Maybe we need QBuild to do one halfway.
I actually visited the Cairns one when I was up there a couple of months ago.
Yep. Yeah, great for apprenticeships, great for local employment, and yeah, it's pretty much halfway, isn't it? So we can service everything equidistant. I'll support you on that. Okay, so yeah, Queensland Government have been using MMC and off-site construction for, I don't know, the last 7 or 8 years, I think, predominantly. Bit longer, yeah. So, say that again?
10 or 12.
10 or 12, okay. So QBuild. So QBuild is the government arm, I think it's the government architect, and I'm not quite sure what QBuild is linked to.
It's the department that's responsible for delivering construction
Right.
on behalf of other departments.
Okay. So they've been concentrating on their MMC side for government housing. I don't have any pictures of that here. The classrooms, so this is one of Dennis's buildings through here. This is a 3-storey classroom building. I've actually done 3-storey classrooms in Melbourne that went together in 3 days, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It's really quick. And hospitals. So this is a modular hospital where they added a brick facade with brick panels to the outside of that. My friend Jackson Hills from Q Shelter, you know Jackson? Yep, lovely guy. Reminded me, I think last week, might have been early this week, that September is Queensland Manufacturing Month. Very, very relevant for what we're doing. And as you can see, he's a big advocate. I was at Gold Coast 2 weeks ago for Prefab Oz conference, where I was elected board member for Prefab Oz, which is really cool. And he did an excellent presentation on how MMC is helping with community housing in Queensland. So why consider? Well, Queensland have quite a number of good modular building manufacturers with the capability and capacity to support projects in Mackay, right? So there's a number of different providers here. We've got a few here today, and some that didn't show up, unfortunately. But it will have win-win effects, okay, if we can utilise the local suppliers. So it could help Mackay supply more housing in a shorter period than expected if we use traditional construction. And it also means that the modular suppliers will have an increased pipeline to train their staff and build their capabilities in the lead up to Brisbane 2032, right? So we've got a small window there where we can take advantage of their skills at the moment. So yeah, most of those suppliers are based in southeast Queensland. Can we look at using their resources and do 2 things at once? So this is the Gantt chart that I was showing before. So you start from the design phase, you know, your concept, you're getting your funding, you know what size, shape building it is, what type of building it is, etc. You do your designing, engineering, architecture, you start preparing the design, everything's, you know, one step after the other. But when you're doing off-site, design for manufacture and assembly, once you've got that design and your funding part underway, okay, then you can start designing that, and you do anyway. So during this feasibility part, you do some very basic and preliminary analysis to figure out how much it's going to cost, what materials you're going to use, etc. You're doing 2 things at once. And then once you get on the ground, you're doing your site manufacture and your site preparation and your manufacture at the same time. There's your factory, there's your site. And then you can start assembling these so your factory doesn't hold everything and release them all at once. And then of course, after you start assembly, you can start doing the finishing and fit out. So putting your buildings together, making sure you seal them up properly, and that's your final fit out. So you've got significant time return compared to traditional construction, right? So I'll break it down 2 different bits. It saves time, okay? And that time creates other benefits. So if you're doing, let's say, a 3 to 4 storey apartment building, okay, you can do 3 or 4 of those every 2 years compared to 1, right? So it takes, you know, that long to put a 3 to 4 storey apartment building together with traditional construction. If you use modular, you can get it done much quicker. So reflecting on that need to do 800 homes per year for the next 20 years, it means that you can probably do 1,600 to 2,400 homes per year using off-site construction if they all did modular compared to doing traditional construction, okay? It's a big ask. And then, of course, the saving in cost, right? So if you're saving 10% on 10 apartments, that's one free, right? Or you can build 11 for the same budget. Let's up that to 100 apartments, right? That's an additional 10 for the same cost that you get. So let's reflect over that 800 again, right? So over the next 20 years. If you're saving 10% on 800 apartments because you're being much more efficient in the way that you construct those buildings, and I'm using 10% as a roundabout figure. Normally it's more than that, right? But conservatively, safely, I'd say 10%. 10% reduction in housing cost automatically starts getting into the attractive housing figures, right? That's if you can get our developers to bring that 10% saving down with the actual selling cost. Or we reduce the budget. So we only need to budget for 730 homes, but we get 800 for the same value, okay? Or we get 880 apartments for the same budget, okay? The big numbers, but 10%, you need to have a look at it in those sort of figures. Early return on investment, right? So this is a hotel project that I'm currently doing. 5-storey hotel. There is over 100 rooms actually. And we did a feasibility study to see whether they wanted to use modular or whether they wanted to do traditional. Okay. Now we've got it so refined that we're using 5 different module types throughout the whole thing. All right. And that's, 1 bed, studio, DDA type rooms, etc. Now, let's bring that down to 100 rooms. Keep the numbers nice and easy. Around about 170 a night, right? That's about what you're going to get in that area. 70% occupancy. Hotels are never 100% full, okay, unless it's public holiday. Over 18 months, if you actually had the 2 hotels built together, one traditional, one using modular, by the time that traditional hotel's actually finished and the doors open, the modular one has already brought in $6.5 million in revenue. That's your early return on investment. Here's the kicker. That hotel budget, $20 million, right? If we can bring in $6.5 million early, game on, right? And now this developer is looking at doing that on another couple of different sites. One of the issues, and I'll be transparent about this as well, is that when you do traditional construction, let's say the building's 16 metres high over 5 levels, you do have this double up, okay? Because when you do volumetric construction, each one has a floor and a ceiling, floor and a ceiling, floor and a ceiling. Whereas in conventional, your concrete slab is the same thing. It's the floor and the ceiling. So it does push the building height up. And if we have building height issues in certain pockets, that's something that we do need to address early on. But again, right from the concept stage, put it all out on the table, be completely transparent about it. If it works in that area, it works.
Is the soundproofing better in modular then?
If you design for it, yeah. Yep.
You've got those 2 layers and then...
You have the 2 layers. It also means that with your walls, you've got 2 walls. So when you design apartment buildings, you generally have 2 walls anyway.
Yeah.
So from a plan point of view, it's not much difference. Sound and acoustic issues have been talked about a lot in volumetric, generally because they're a lighter structure than the concrete. So as long as you raise that again right from the very start and we design the building to what acoustic level you actually want, then again, that is added into the feasibility plan and yeah, you shouldn't have any difference at all.
Is it the same for thermal efficiencies as well?
Thermal's generally even better,
Yeah.
right?
I thought so.
Yeah. And part of the reason is that there's a consistency in the factory and you're not leaving everything out in the rain during construction, so things don't shrink and expand and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, air tightness. Yeah, plus, yeah, your windows are all done flat. So your wall frames are generally done flat on a table, much easier than dealing with things vertical. So, by my observation, my opinion, regional Queensland's got a few years left to take advantage of using the building manufacturers in southeast Queensland before that wave of population going to Brisbane, and they all just go, look, we're too busy here to deal with the rest of the regional Queensland. But there's a lag at the moment, and it's that infrastructure that they need to put in around Brisbane, Gold Coast, Sunshine Coast, etc. So the timing's pretty good right now. The limited building capability will escalate around Brisbane, Gold Coast. Construction costs will go up, and people will look for other areas to live where they can afford to live. Hello, a beautiful area here. So, workforce accommodation, big one right now. I think now's a pretty good time to act or even consider it going forward. This is from Slattery's, so they're a national quantity surveyor. I think their executive director nailed it on the head that a tsunami of projects is about to hit Queensland, and workforce capacity will determine how quickly projects get out of the ground and at what cost. Many projects may be paused until after the Olympic fever abates. Right? I was lucky enough to be involved in the Sydney Olympics. Spent a lot of time around Sydney watching it grow. Those last 2 to 3 years, predominantly those 2 years, is a mad rush, right? And there's going to be a lot of money spent around there, which everyone wants a piece of. So let's try and do whatever we can in this area before a lot of that money gets sucked down towards Brisbane. Queensland Tourism Industry Council released a strategic plan last Monday, and they highlighted the urgent need for tourism infrastructure investment, and that's particularly relevant for this region. So apparently Southeast Queensland only has 46,000 hotel rooms available at this point in time. That's less than half of what Los Angeles have, which has got the Olympics in 2 and a bit years, and Paris, which had even more. Right, we're in a bit of trouble here. So even with committed developments, capacity is expected to grow to only 51,000 rooms by 2030. And that's leaving Queensland significantly short of what's needed to meet the demand. This is an image of what's happening at Hook Island. And what I mentioned before is, except for the beach club, all of these villas that you can see up here and around the point, and even some of the restaurants, etc., they're all going to be manufactured off-site. They look like they're timber on the outside. They're actually steel framed. They're going to have the screw piles into rock, so they're embedded into the rock for cyclone. And you'll also find that this isn't right, but the water levels account for the year 2100 and what the sea levels will be at that point in time. So lots of planning gone into this, and once construction gets underway on that, you'll see that resort come up quite quickly compared to traditional construction. I was hoping Tahi was going to be here tonight, but I don't think he is. So this is what we call the McCarthy curve. It's the cost, they call it cost influence curve, but I think it's also the influence on which way you want to go down the project. The biggest influence you can have is right from the very start, okay, and how that affects the cost. So if you make some changes here, then you address those changes right now. If you start making changes in construction, particularly during construction, right, those costs are really expensive because of the ongoing effects. Your ability to make those or to influence those changes are very small. Once you've started construction, it's really hard because of the cost, right, and further delays, etc. So right at the very start, right at concept, is the biggest influence that you can make to say, let's use MMC if the building lends itself to that. Let's use these materials. Let's have a look at these 2 or 3 different suppliers. This is the way we want to go down the path. Buildings that use modern methods of construction, as I mentioned before, need to be designed for that particular way of the building's going to go together, that particular framing system. Trying to adapt a building, an existing design, to say, let's just do this one out of modular, Dennis is smiling, it doesn't work, right? I don't think I've ever seen it done before. This is a development in Mackay. It's been around since about 2011. The architect from Sydney came to me and said, can we do this in modular? All right, let's put our rectangles around. This one actually works. This one kind of works, okay? When we start looking at this apartment in here, there's only one regular module that fits through here. It goes through a bathroom. It doesn't deal with the shape of these 2 rooms going together. And when we put another module to address the neighbour's unit, we've got a module that's shared between two different owners. That starts leading to insurance issues, fire issues, all that sort of stuff. It's too hard, okay? 99% of the time, it's too hard. So you really do, if you're going to go down the path of using off-site construction, whether it is panelised or whether it's volumetric, you need to start from scratch. The access to construction loan funding. So traditionally what has happened is that when you do traditional construction, you get your progress payments. So if we talk about a house, your slab goes down, the builder gets part payment. The frame goes up, the builder gets part payment. The building gets closed, the builder gets a payment, etc. Or what's been happening up until this year with modular is that all of this gets done in the factory. The bank feels very nervous about that. Okay, from a risk aversion point of view, what happens if the manufacturer goes into administration, the bank can't get access to it, right? So therefore, 80% of the cost of construction was locked up in the modules in the factory. And therefore, you either had to pay the modular company a lot of money to do that, or the modular company had to foot that bill and would charge you extra down the track. What's only happened this year is that Commonwealth Bank have actually seen the writing on the wall and said that's just going to hold up MMC happening. So what they've got available right now is for Class 1 dwellings, which is just typical homes. You can actually get your typical progress payments using modular construction, as long as you use one of their, I can't remember how many it is, one of the modular builders who are registered with Commonwealth Bank to do modular homes. They're currently in the process of doing that for Class 2 buildings, which is apartment buildings and workers' accommodation. They're also developing the contracts as well. So between them and Prefab Oz, they're developing the contracts to make sure that the lawyers, it's all in lawyer talk, it's all legal, and it's all agreed upon that, you know, this is the way the system will work. So the funding for this type of construction is getting better and better. Another way of getting started, so this is the Modern Methods of Construction Low-Rise Housing Design Guideline. So Dennis and I were both subject matter experts in working with QBuild and Sensum to develop this guideline. It's about 200 pages thick. It's got some typical layouts in there for 3-storey apartment buildings, and it's so modular that we used, I think it's 2 or 3 different module types, but we could reconfigure 18 different buildings on the same site. Okay, but it's car parks at grade, car park. I don't even think we had car parks basement, did we? It was just the way that modular actually works when it's designed right. Means that you can get lots of efficiency out of that. So QBuild are actually making some good inroads in using MMC, but at this stage, this is available for free to developers to look at, to get some ideas on how to implement the system. They're currently only doing 2 levels at the moment. Just this week, the Queensland Government announced an always open procurement program called QCHIP, which is the Community Housing Investment Pipeline. So what that actually means is that for community housing providers, if you have a site that's ready to go, if you have designs that are ready to go for those sites, then you can tap into that program. The funding is there, ready to go, right? So if you can access that and use MMC, then you're going to start pumping out a lot of housing very quickly with the funding ready to go. It's amazing, right? It's the first time they've ever done this in Australia. So that was a post from Housing Minister. The best way to get started is to use design teams that have already done this before. And as I've noted there, it's probably the most popular question that I get asked. At least once a week, I get a phone call. Who do you use as your architect? Who do you use as your building certifier? What modular manufacturers should I go and talk to? Okay, because to use someone who's done it before has already been through the pain, right? They're not going to keep making the same mistakes. We keep getting expert people who've done this before. So at Building Expo in Sydney earlier this year, there's 40,000 people through the door. Most of the people that were on the panel this year were in the audience last year, saying that they've done one job, all of a sudden they know how it works. That's not how it works, right? Use an architect rather than a building designer or a draftsperson, because architects, they've studied pedagogy for school classrooms, they study living standards for homes, they don't just study about the building. It's more than the building. You get significantly better value in engaging an architect who's done this before, okay? And the studies are also showing that the resale value on buildings designed by architects is significantly more than buildings designed by building designers, okay? And a lot of the modular manufacturers have their own internal design teams with their own internal building designers, okay? And that's why a lot of them all look the same. Choose modular manufacturers who have prototypes or case studies. Go and have a look at it. Touch it, feel it, smell it, ask how much it cost. How long did it take to put together? What errors did you come across? Can you get some references from people who've had their product before? And of course, conduct a feasibility study if your project's big enough, and get the quantity surveyor, get the builders, get some pricing in to compare traditional versus construction. But when you do that, don't just look at the cost for construction, okay? Include the overall costs. Have a look at that early return on investment at the end, and then see what the actual result is after completion. There's a couple of attendees here today. So Dennis from Verbassus is here, it's an architect. Karen Gear is here, yep, so Karen's here. She's from Sigma Build. Okay, they're looking at going multi-level housing as well. Excellent. Demi, are you here? Demi's not here. Okay, so McHugh's from Bundaberg. They're already doing light gauge steel modular housing as well. Really good product. And of course you can reach out or have a look at the Prefab Oz website, and for their members to see, are they learning? Do they actually go to conferences every year? Do they collaborate? Do they learn from each other's mistakes? Are they reputable? Are they registered with the Commonwealth Bank? Right? Do they use those contracts that have already been set up for modern methods of construction? And coming up in next month on Channel 9, there's Epic Builds, which is hosted by Adam Spencer. So this is, let me see if I can get this one to work.
Two students at the same school. They have the same teachers. They learn the same material. Both.
What do you get when you mix tight timelines,
Oh, you can't see it.
wild
Okay.
locations, and buildings that are on?
All right. Why is that not going across?
I can upload it to the video later if you like.
Ah, okay. All right. Thank you. So there is a show on Channel 9 that's coming up. Are you on it, Dennis? Yep. It's all about using prefab in buildings, making it mainstream. So I'm a believer that when enough people actually see off-site construction being built, they'll say, I want my house built that way. I don't want it done the traditional way. And this is one of the programs that will help do that. So one of the projects that they've got here, they go into a factory at TBS, which is Timber Building Solutions, down in Melbourne. And they show you how they use flat pack systems. They put them all together on the back of a truck. They take it on a ship over to King Island, which is between Melbourne and Tassie. And they put together, I think it's something like 30 houses in 30 days, right? Door open, in you go. Pretty convincing stuff. So keep an eye out for that on Channel 9. Let's hope they have 2 seasons, because I've got a couple of doozy projects coming up. There you go.
They've already approached us about the second season.
Have they?
So they've been signed up for it.
Oh, well done. That's cool.
Have
Yeah.
a chat to them.
Yeah, that's really cool. And that's it for me. So thank you to Rob, thank you to Nick, and thank you everyone for turning up tonight. If you have any any questions, more than happy to do my best to respond to them. Yes. Welcome.
automation
Yes.
and robotics
Yeah.
and AI, what are you seeing being utilised now, and what do you think you see in the future
Okay.
in that space?
Yep. AI should affect design. So the more standardised we get, the more we'll be able to use that information. But it doesn't take away the human capability to design a room to suit what the owner wants for that type of room, right? Otherwise, we're going to get the old cookie cutter approach.
It'll increase efficiency.
Correct, right? So there's already things like parametric design, which is where you can copy things out using the same parameters very, very quick. Generative design, which is where you do exactly the same thing, but it designs, for my part, steel members and column sizes and all that very, very quick. Robotics. So in Australia, there's only one modular provider that's already doing this. It's Modscape. They have a robot factory in Essendon, which is one of the airports in Melbourne. It's all timber-based. They have used that facility to make a 3-storey modular building that's being shipped up to Cairns. So those modules are being made in panels in Melbourne, shipped to their facility in Brisbane, assembled into modules, and then shipped up to Cairns, right? The distance from Melbourne to Brisbane is the same from Brisbane to Cairns, right? It's a long way to ship a volumetric module. At this stage, there are no robotic factories doing steel. Will it help? Yes, absolutely, right? Those modules, to be efficient, do need to be repetitive. So I can't remember how many modules that facility is in Cairns, but it's in the hundreds. The reason they actually had that facility was because Melbourne were going to be hosting the Commonwealth Games next year, and they had 10 to 15,000 athletes going to Melbourne. The intention was that they were going to build 3-storey accommodation facilities. At the end of the Games, they were going to be disassembled and transported to regional Victoria, right? There's talk about doing that in Queensland as well. So that, the Olympics generally does have 15,000 athletes. So there are talk about keeping 3 levels permanent in Brisbane, adding another 3 levels that can be there for the Games, and then the permanent buildings, but they're disassemblable. In other words, they can be moved to regional areas, right? So when you're talking about that volume, the cost of doing robotics absolutely makes sense, right? They have a 50% investment partner from South Korea. That's the only way you could actually afford to do it in Australia. What happens after Cairns, I don't know. But I know that they're investing in another robotics factory just outside of Brisbane, in Cresmead. And I think it's because of the 50-odd thousand homes that Queensland require. They'll get a decent-sized chunk of that to make that factory work. One thing we've recently talked about here is if we ever get past the housing crisis, is there potential to export housing from Queensland? That would be amazing, right? That would be a wish list for me.
To the equatorial region.
100%, right? So we already do export some modular to Pacific Islands, Australian consulates, all that sort of thing. But in terms of housing, I think that's exactly what it's geared up for.
And to the future. So robotics, as we know, and especially humanoid robotics, so evolving very, very quickly. So what do you see? What do you foresee?
Very hard to tell.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't answer that one.
Haven't got a view on that one?
No. I think for steel, absolutely. There's a lot of talk from the timber industry, how they're geared up for the amount of timber that we're using in mass engineered timber buildings, CLT. I don't know if you've ever seen a CLT slab, right? So Modscape had been starting to use CLT in their floors, right? It's 120 thick, this much timber across an entire room, right? It looks beautiful. It means that you don't need to weld joists at every 450 mil centres. It just drop in, zip it in with the screws really, really quick. I was working with a British design company called Bryden Wood. They're architects, engineers, ESD, all that sort of stuff. And they did a carbon assessment on it. And I was going to go into carbon assessment here today, but that's another issue altogether.
That was my next question. I'll leave it alone.
No, I can answer it if you like. But so embodied carbon using traditional light gauge steel for joists, let's call it 19 mil ply over the top, was half of what you get out of a CLT slab, right? Add to that the weight of this thing, right? When you start going multi-levels, it starts meaning that your columns are getting bigger, your footings are getting bigger, and the ongoing effect of that.
The logistics of installing as well.
Yeah.
Correct. Well, the number of suppliers. So we have 2 suppliers in Australia. One's in Albury and the other one's in South Australia. So trying to get them up here is another cost as well. So the timber forestry companies all reckon they've made the investment, they've planted enough trees, it is renewable, so that there's enough there for the 20-year projection, but it's still a lot, right? Steel is continually recyclable, right? And we're getting to the point now where we do have codes on how do we trace that, you know, how do we check for that sort of stuff.
Components are effectively looking at predominantly fly-in, fly-out workforce coming into a regional location, so they're, you know, already planning and committing to workforce accommodation and the nature of that workforce accommodation, because they equally also have to think, you know, hit diversity targets and all these sort of things as part of their requirements now, and also their own carbon footprint for their own projects. Things like reuse of workforce accommodation, which now, instead of being, like, once again, a mine-donger type concept, to one where it's a single bedroom, fully contained apartment, effectively.
Absolutely.
And talking with the companies, particularly under the new social licence arrangements that are now in place, there is an active interest from them to start to talk with community around, well, could you reuse them? So could you re-provision them for broader community use, where as a company we might be well and truly prepared to effectively move them for you and give them to you at no cost as our legacy and social operational licence.
So one way we're getting around that is we use DFMA-D, so it's designed for manufacture and assembly and disassembly. So there's 2 reasons for that. One is you put a compliance plate, like a car. It's got a wind load rating, it's got the name of the manufacturer, it's got the date of manufacturer, and the occupancy type, right? So if you've got residential, it's got a different floor load to a hotel, or a hotel's got a different floor load to classrooms and all that sort of stuff. So the traceability is there for insurance purposes and design or building certification purposes. The other one is ownership, traceability with that. And insurance companies in the UK have started measuring this, so since 2015, and they did this study purely for defects, and they measured every volumetric building used for a house in the UK over 5 years, from 2015 to 2020, and they found a 95% reduction in defects for modular buildings built in a factory compared to what you get in a traditional home. So all of a sudden, those values go up. The other thing is Toyota are the 8th largest home builder in Japan. Toyota make modular homes. Toyota treat their modular homes the same way that they treat their cars. You get your home serviced every 18 months to 2 years. You got a logbook, tick it off, check the compliance, nothing's adjusted to it, and you go to sell that home, it's worth more money than what the neighbour's house actually is.
One of my comments is obviously, so on that example, are we likely to see some of that starting to get traction in Australia?
Yeah.
Obviously, irrespective of whether it's traditional or modular, there is an inherent challenge in terms of outright affordability for a large cross-section of the community. And so different financing oriented arrangements and models, I would suspect, would be a godsend for probably 40% of homeowners or potential homeowners.
Financing and commercial. So some of you may have heard of the whole life cycle carbon assessment, right? What that means is how much embodied carbon is in the building to make it, how much carbon do you actually use during the operation for the 50-year life cycle, and then one thing we're shit at in Australia, excuse my French, is what do we do with the materials at the end, right? So by designing these buildings for disassembly, we go, well, the steel can be recycled, the timber can be reused for other things, etc. The wiring can be melted down and whatever. So when you actually have commercial buildings that have been designed for that whole life cycle carbon assessment, you find that you get a higher rate of rent. You can charge a higher rent because it's certified to say, particularly now, because large corporations need to be transparent about how much carbon they're using. So if they're renting an office building that's designed for this and it's proven for that, game on, right? From a funding point of view, yeah, if you can actually provide that traceability to show that all that's considered in here, then companies like the CBA will be right behind it, 100%. Just on that disassemble, this car park is disassemblable. It's designed, it's concrete, but the connections here are designed for that car park to be there for 2 years. And then when it's finished, I think there's a detail there I showed on the bottom of the columns. Where is it? Wrong way. Where it can be unbolted at the bottom. There it is. Lifted off, taken away. All these can all be, you chip away the topping screed at the top, unbolt everything, take it, move it to the next site, right? That's pretty clever stuff. So when you have works accommodation, 200 people, where are they going to park their cars, right? If you've got a site nearby where you can do that, then that's another factor to add to your building component.
And my last question would be, so we've spoken a lot around Australian-oriented opportunity for companies that are specialising in this. Do you foresee the Australian market being of interest to international-based companies that may well be at even larger scale again, but which has capacity, I suppose, to deliver an Australian style of product, whatever that may mean.
Yep.
But in terms of being, I suppose, physically a major disruptor in terms of the current market, because that's probably the other thing that tends to be missing is that, if you look at a lot of other manufacturing, there has been major disruption to the tradition and the norms, which is driving perhaps some of the considerations around broader productivity improvements in other sectors and all those sort of things, which sort of the construction sector to date hasn't really been probably exposed to that same level of fundamental disruptor.
There's not many modular companies in Australia that can build enough modules in a shorter period of time to go more than 5 levels, right? There's probably 2 that I can think of. They can all do it, but they just can't make it in the amount of time. Like, it would take them too long to do it. They'd be stacking them, storing them in a holding area until they're all ready to go, and then stack them in like a month's time. So we're finding, particularly from China, Vietnam, those buildings, there's a 16-storey one that's about to start construction in Sydney. It's all been coming from China, right? So with that, there's been a 2-year assessment period on compliance, currency fluctuations, quality checks, all that sort of stuff. Building commissioners crawling all over the prototypes to get to that period, right? There's recently been another modular provider, international company, that has opened an office in Australia where they're saying, we can do this for you, right? That's going to be the game changer. So I've been predicting this for quite a while. It was going to happen. What I'm hoping is that a lot of the modular companies here will go, is that how you do it, right? We need to be like them to stop more happening. So I think it's going to happen anyway. I think it needs to happen. So then a lot of the local manufacturers see how that works and that the market does want that volume of modules, so that then we can get the funding to do exactly the same thing here. I think Southeast Queensland is ready to go. Yeah.
Well, I think you're talking about robotics and steel. Yeah. They do that already. I think we're doing robotic welding and everything else. Testing, the infrared checking and quality as well. So
correct.
They do it all.
Correct. The biggest issue that we've got in Australia is the cost of labour.
Yep, that's why you need to automate.
Correct.
That's
right.
why I can't, just imagining a use case around the assembly on site and the de-assembly from a robotics or robotic supported methodology.
The robotics is already done at that point. We've got enough cranes, we've got enough truckies, we've got the roads and all that sort of stuff for it. The devil's in the detail. But, you know, we've got the smarts, we've got people who can do it, but we've just got to figure out a way to make it cheaper.
And so there was a question before that Karen might have asked it around, I suppose, the region and manufacturing opportunity, so not just supplying homes but manufacturing. I suppose the part of me sort of questions how viable that might be in regional Queensland given the lack of population, but relative to making a decision to set it up in Gold Coast or SEQ or, you know, somewhere down there. But perhaps the opportunity is that assembly piece where there might well be some real opportunity to actually see regional centres, not just Mackay, but the benefits of potentially having that large assembly. And I suppose particularly if we think about particularly Mackay and the Paget area and that sort of stuff, may well be potentially well suited given the nature of that estate and for that sort of potential investment. Is that I suppose my question is that something that perhaps we should be a little bit more active in potentially exploring?
I think geographically where Mackay is located is absolutely spot on. The biggest competitor you've got is the mines. So if you've got trades that are competing with mine money compared to building construction money, they want to go to the mines. Lifestyle, Mackay any day of the week, right?
What do you get when you mix tight timelines, wild locations, and buildings that arrive by truck, boat and plane? You get an epic build. Prefab just got serious.